Hello and welcome to the Service to School Stories podcast. You'll hear from veterans and partners who'll share their stories and insights about how you can use higher education to transition from the military and achieve your goals. Now let's get going.
All right, everyone. Welcome to Service to School Stories podcast. Today, we are joined by one of our VetLink partners, Brown University, and I have the incredible opportunity to chat with Bailey DiOrio and Mac Manning. Excited to chat with both of you about the work you're doing at Brown and how you're supporting student veterans in your work. So, Bailey, we'll go ahead and kick things off. Can you tell our listeners a little bit about you and your background and your work there at Brown?
Sure. Thank you so much for having us, Sydney. My name is Bailey DiOrio. I'm an Associate Director of Admission at Brown. I've been in the office now for just about 8 years, which is kind of hard to believe sometimes, but I've done a lot of different things, had many different responsibilities in our office, but something that is more recent for me, which has been really exciting and really rewarding, has been working with our veteran applicants through our veteran application to Brown. So kind of helping to support veteran applicants as they go through the admission process and overseeing the internal admission process and the process by which we evaluate all of those applications.
Yeah, thanks for that. And then Mac, how about you?
So Mac Manning, I serve as the director of the Office of Military Affiliated Students here at Brown University, where I've been at Brown since 2022, where I primarily oversee the execution of the Veterans Initiative program in general, and in very large collaboration with organizations like Service to School and the admissions office in that effort.
Yeah, thanks for that. So Bailey, one thing I just also want to start at the top of the conversation. One thing I appreciate about you is whenever I send you an intro email from a veteran, you are so quick to respond. And that is something
I
that
try.
is such a small detail, but really stands out to our student population because it shows that you are very interested in them as an applicant, and also it just creates this personal, relationship that I think is so important with our student population because they have very unique questions. They're coming to the admissions process from a unique background. So I really appreciate how responsive you are there. But can you talk to us a little bit about, how you manage working with student veterans through the admissions process and what that day-to-day for you looks like?
Sure, yeah. So it's really helpful getting those introduction emails from you and your colleagues. I think it, like you said, gives students kind of a personal touch point that makes the university feel a little bit more accessible. And so often those can be some of my first introductions to some potential applicants to Brown through our veteran application process. Mac will also sometimes be in touch with prospective students who find his office, and he'll sometimes send them along to me if they have questions more specifically about the admission process in our veteran application. So it really depends on the day and sort of what the interest level might be, but usually what I'll do is I'll send kind of a quick general introduction email with some of the basics about how to apply to Brown as a veteran and some of the different resources and opportunities for veterans on our campus, and then sort of leave it up to them on their end. If they want to learn more, I'm happy to set up a Zoom call, 30 minutes to an hour, depending on what questions they might have, just to kind of go through things in a little bit more detail. I know that often, this veteran application is pretty unique to Brown, so there might be questions about that since it's a little bit different than how they may be applying to other schools, and also just hopefully to get them familiar with some of the unique opportunities that Brown has to offer. So those are kind of the first initial touch points that I typically have with prospective students.
Yeah, and let's talk about the Brown specific application. So unique to Brown, there are, I think, about 3 partners now that have a veteran specific application. But talk to us a little bit about Brown's and what that looks like.
Yeah, so I'm sure Mac might talk a little bit more also about the Veteran Initiative, but this kind of all came out of the Veteran Initiative, which was something that Brown's president announced back in, I believe it was 2019. Basically, just an initiative that Brown wanted to undertake to increase the number of U.S. military veterans that are enrolled as undergraduates at Brown. And so there were a lot of different parts of this initiative, but one of the major parts was developing a veteran-friendly application that kind of just allows applicants the chance to highlight their military experience as part of their admission application to Brown. This application also doesn't have any application fee, and it's something that we really strongly encourage veterans to choose as they're kind of considering the different routes of applying to Brown, because it is that little bit more kind of tailored application experience to give veterans the space and the more kind of specifically tailored questions to allow them to talk about their military service and their military background and experiences and how that has kind of impacted their decision to apply to college now and what they're looking for out of their future educational experiences and kind of what their future goals even beyond that are and how Brown might assist them in taking the steps towards those goals. So Brown's veteran application has kind of 4, I would say, like short answer to essay length questions that, like I said, are a little bit more specifically tailored to the veteran experience. So the first question we ask is about them to talk a little bit about their academic interests and how their personal or professional experiences relate to those specific interests. We also will ask them why they're considering Brown for the next step on their educational journey, and in addition to academics, what they are hoping in terms of the way they might engage outside of the classroom at Brown. We'll also ask them about, kind of taking a moment to reflect on where they've come from and how different aspects of their life growing up have either inspired or challenged them, and what unique contributions those experiences might allow them to make to Brown's community. And then lastly, this is kind of the more fuller essay question, which will ask applicants to talk about how their military experience has contributed to their personal growth and their future plans as well. So those are kind of the more specific questions that we ask to hopefully just give veterans the chance to really talk about that experience, because I think sometimes with the first year or the transfer common application, the questions are just a little bit more general, and unless you know to sort of talk about how those experiences have impacted your goals and your, who you are now as a student, it's harder to know kind of where to talk about those things sometimes.
Yeah, absolutely. And that kind of intentionality in creating that admissions process, I think also speaks to, you being responsive, but also the institution's investment in being accessible to the student population. But also the intentionality in the questions there, right? We tell students all the time, just wanting to go to Brown for the name of Brown is not going to be enough in the application. They're going to ask you questions that help you articulate kind of your why of even pursuing higher education, but more specifically at Brown. So having a clear understanding that, there's so much more to Brown than the open curriculum or this veteran pathway. And just, kind of sharing surface level insights, either personally or about their higher ed goals, from our team, is really not enough. But I'd love to hear a little bit from you. Like, what are some things that you are looking for in their responses? Kind of playing off of that advice around just saying like the open curriculum or Brown's name. Like that's not enough. But what are some things you're looking for?
Yeah, so I think when we evaluate an application, we sort of think about it in terms of a few different categories, but the whole kind of process that we use as we review each application, whether it's through our veteran application or really in any part of our admission process at Brown, is considering applications in a really holistic manner. So I think often when students hear the term holistic admission, they kind of initially think, okay, that means they read my whole application. And yes, that is kind of an initial part of that definition. We really do look at every single part of an application to hopefully try to better understand each applicant as a whole person in our process. So not just their academics, not just life outside the classroom, but really kind of who they are and who they hope to be in the future as well. But I think also really importantly, in terms of this holistic review, it also means that we read each application in a very kind of individual and contextualized way. So we always encourage applicants to share as much information with us as possible, anything they think would be helpful for us to know, any important context or background information that might not be immediately kind of obvious in their application. If there's anything they feel like would be helpful for us to know, we hope they use the space in the application to tell us about those things. And so in terms of kind of how we review individual applications, we sort of think about it in these few different categories: academic achievement, and then sort of the personal side to an applicant. And obviously, particularly with our veteran application, we're thinking about that applicant's military background. And then we're also thinking about kind of overall, what is the student's fit for Brown? So in terms of academic achievement, that's going to be probably one of the primary things we're looking at. We're looking at their academic performance from high school and then any colleges they've attended before they've applied to Brown. We understand that many veterans have followed a pretty non-traditional academic path, and that high school may have been completed a pretty long time ago by the time that they're submitting their application to Brown. So, we're taking all of that context into account as we're reviewing those transcripts, those grades. We always hope to see kind of an upward trajectory of grades, and we do really strongly encourage veteran applicants as they're kind of considering that future college application process to think about the opportunity to take some community college or other kind of college level coursework leading up to applying to Brown, because if high school has been a long time ago, it's helpful to have some more recent academic coursework to really demonstrate that academic potential and that more recent academic achievement to better understand, how this applicant will transition to the rigors of the open curriculum and Brown as a whole. So that's sort of the academic achievement piece of things. And then in terms of military background, we love partnering with Service to School because you provide us with the very helpful VetLink addendum as part of the application materials that I think really help us better understand each applicant's military service and experiences. In addition to that, we'll also ask for typically at least one recommendation letter from a military supervisor or a commanding officer. And so usually that person is able to really help provide some additional insight into a veteran's service and their achievements during their military experience. And we also understand that learning kind of happens in many different settings. It might not just take place in the classroom. It might also be, part of that service experience. So often those recommenders can help kind of illuminate some of that aspect of a veteran's military service as well. Like I talked about before, we have a lot of very specific tailored questions that also give you the opportunity to kind of speak more about your military background and experience and how that has impacted your goals and kind of what you hope to study and experience in college. And then lastly, in terms of that fit for Brown more generally, I think, that's something that we think about both in terms of academic life at Brown and then also outside of the classroom. So that first question that we ask is about a student's academic interests, and we hope that students will think about, how do they plan to use the open curriculum to explore those things. The open curriculum is a pretty unique academic experience. I think there are only about a dozen or so colleges around the country that offers an open curriculum, and so it's a very student-driven experience. Basically, for anyone who's unfamiliar, what it means is that rather than having students complete a core curriculum or a set of distribution requirements or kind of like a list of general education classes, Brown kind of gives students the freedom and flexibility to choose their classes and kind of just determine their academic path. And so, like I said, super student-driven, very flexible approach to education, but also very rigorous at the same time because it does put a lot of responsibility in the hands of our students. And I think kind of pushes students to think very critically about what are their future goals, what do they want to emphasize in their learning. I think we find that often our veteran students are kind of uniquely prepared for this type of education because they're often, as I said, a bit further removed from high school. They have really lived a full adult life while serving in the military, and that often informs those future goals, and I think helps them kind of more fully and closely consider what they are interested in terms of their college experience and what they hope to gain from that. And then, like I said, sort of the other part of Fit for Brown is also our community. Brown is really a very collaborative and supportive community. So we're looking to bring students to campus who want to be a part of that type of community and who are hoping to engage with their peers in and out of the classroom and kind of find community beyond academics. And so, a lot of our veteran students will engage directly with our Office of Military Affiliated Students and work with MAC and sort of find that tight-knit, close-knit community there. But our veterans are also really kind of engaged fully in everything that Brown has to offer outside of the classroom. So whether that's community service or music or athletics or writing for the Brown Daily Herald or even being a tour guide for our office. So there are a lot of different ways to engage at Brown, and we just hope that within this application, veterans will kind of highlight how they hope to experience life outside the classroom as well.
Yeah, I think it's so important you talked about, the value of community and thinking about the community that our students are going to join once they arrive on campus. Which I think, once a student talks to Bailey, they're probably thinking, "Oh, okay, Brown is a good place for me, to continue my studies." And then I imagine Bailey, you introduce him to Mac, and then he kind of brings it on home. So Mac, I want to hear a little bit more from you. I've had the wonderful opportunity to work closely with two of our students, Taryn Wise and Chloe. She just wrapped up her time on our student advisory board, but just two incredible individuals who sounds like have really taken advantage of everything Brown has to offer and the community that they've found there on campus. So I'd love to hear from you, kind of what that looks like for you to kind of bring that experience full circle for the student as well.
First of all, I want to start by saying Bailey give quite a robust answer in terms of, I don't think I could have said it any better than me
Good.
myself. But the what we strive to do. So in 2019, when we established the Veterans Initiative, it brought with it solidified a couple things. One being the veterans application process. Two would be some financial aid resources to make sure veterans with their GI Bill education benefits could attend Brown with no additional out-of-pocket cost. But another thing was it really expanded and solidified the Office of Military Affiliate Students. We had a couple great predecessors before I got here, but some of them were, part-time employees. Whereas now we have dedicated staff members, myself, and I also have a program coordinator, as well as some additional resources like we have a veterans lounge where our physical offices are located. So I don't love the term one-stop shop, but the thing that I like to identify is we are your main point of contact for all things, regardless if they're directly affiliated with your military identity or not. And so even if we're not the right office, that's going to resolve an issue in your time at Brown, we're the best place to start because we'll actually go on your behalf and get you connected with the right resources. And so that could be a really useful sort of middleman to cut out a lot of the challenges for veterans assimilating into an institution. When we talk about the life cycle of students, OMAS in particular looks at its students when they're prospective students, once they're matriculated, and then once they become part of our forever alumni. And we work with them on every single part of that process. So someone within the full-time staff, between myself, Bailey, and someone within OMAS, will meet with a prospective student for 1 hour Zoom. That's not necessary for everybody because I think the application can be very straightforward for some people. And then once you're accepted and you elect to come to Brown, we do have a robust programmatic initiative that we work to. We have dedicated funding to help support this. I have a very a la carte approach when it comes to programmatic because some veterans want to be super involved with OMAS and spend a lot of time with OMAS. Some veterans, maybe they have, they're married, have a spouse, and they're very demanding academic program where they come up and find out, is everything taken care of? Am I good to go? And then I don't see much of them. I would say it's not that often that happens, but it does happen. And then we have students that sort of get really involved and integrated into the traditional Brown community where being a veteran is an important part of the identity, but they're going to come to events here and there. They're going to come to Veterans Day, but they're not going to be utilizing office as much. We're there to facilitate whatever kind of model works best for you to make the most of your Brown experience. And I think that matches really well with sort of the concept of Brown and sort of the dynamic open curriculum and just the way that the university operates. And it just facilitates it really well. We have a significant amount of programs. I've already sort of mentioned, we run our Veterans Day formal ceremony, which has a really big attendance. We also do our graduation ceremony where we recognize not only the veterans, but also the ROTC, because that falls under our umbrella as the Office of Military Affiliate Students. And then beyond that, we have several different programmatic initiatives between socials that are held at the Brown Faculty Club, which is very Ivy League sounding, and it's actually very Ivy League in general. But then we also have a robust professional development program because, part of the reason people want to take the initiative and go to an Ivy League is to see that return on investment. Maybe with their GI Bill, it's not directly coming out of pocket, but they earned that entitlement and they want to make sure that that time that they spent to earn that is a return. And so, we put a lot of emphasis on making sure they land on their feet post-graduation. And then we also do programmatic within our Veterans Day to hope to try and make you want to come back and take part in our Veterans Day ceremony activities. So I think it's something that's constantly changing, but it's been really wonderful for me since 2022 to oversee this office and sort of lead it in the way that I've always sort of dreamt to be leading it, which is creating programming that if I'm really interested in, if I would want to go as a student veteran, which I was I transitioned as a student veteran back to the campus, and I've gone through a lot of these processes, a little bit older now. That if I wouldn't find something very interesting or beneficial, I wouldn't program it. And I think that we've tried to take that into stride with our programming today.
Yeah. What's been your favorite programming, Mac, that you've launched there?
We just established this program. Well, I wouldn't say just. It's a third year of this edition of the Brown Battle Buddies, which is a pre-orientation program. The concept Battle Buddies is a terminology used in the military where it's like when you first get in, you can't do anything without a battle buddy. And so it's a little bit tongue in cheek of like, you can't make a head call, you can't go to chow hall, you can't even PT sometimes on your own without a battle buddy. And again, the idea of it is not that they're irresponsible when they come to Brown, but there's all these nuanced questions to where, like, how do I register for classes? Where do people park? Is a parking pass worth it? Is a meal plan worth it? If I live off campus, all these things that I think are sort of individual decisions, but also, I'm going to be less qualified to give you the answer because I didn't go through it last year. So what we do is we pair returning student veterans with incoming student veterans cohort. And we just celebrated our third annual Brown Battle Buddies program that had our incoming class of 22 matriculated service members. We had 10 battle buddy mentors. So everyone got 2 battle buddies. In the past, we've actually had more mentors than mentees, but that has since flipped, which is really
As
fantastic.
Bailey's just knocking it out of the park and sending more.
Yeah, it's been really great. And we also have a very good population that's really committed to seeing this grow and relatively pretty small. Our total undergraduate student veteran population is 75, which when we established the veteran initiative was 18. So we've just seen a lot of changes over the last couple of years. But the Brown Battle Buddies on 2 levels. One is it gives the veterans a soft landing so that they are really set onto a good path right off the bat. And sometimes that cultivates and blossoms into a very good long-term sort of mentorship, friendship. But in other ways, if it's something where, it just sort of lets them go and they can sort of land successfully very quickly, and then they just assimilate back to the regular population, that's fine as well. Like all things, we try and make programming that's going to be beneficial for all different people that want to use it. And that's something that, I had an idea of it a while ago, but there just wasn't the right model until I came to Brown. So it's been very successful and something that I'm most proud of in the last couple of years, but we're just getting started. Our professional development has been very successful. And the cool thing about that is we've kind of established new programs every single year, some that we've retained, some that we want to try new things. And the whole goal is to see the benefit of the student veteran population.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's been really fun to be on our side and watch the veteran communities grow at some of our partner schools, but then to also pinpoint, what are some of the things that some partner schools have done to grow their student veteran population. So, I mean, kudos to you all for, like I said at the beginning, being intentional about that work, but also investing in the student population. It's the old saying, if you build it, they will come. And you all just have, built such a great structure and foundation there to continue to see, that growth and that excitement, right? Like we kind of hear like, oh, what's the popular school this admission cycle? And just to hear the continued growth and excitement for Brown is just, I'm really excited for you all and for the students that are, going to join your community there. Max, something I want to hear from your perspective on a little bit is we talk at Service to School about the value of the veteran voice in the classroom. And can you talk to the listeners a little bit about how your student veterans interact with their faculty members, or what's kind of the approach of faculty members with having veterans in the classroom, and what has that transition been like as more veterans have been on campus?
Yeah, I think that, look, veterans perform a little bit better than their civilian counterparts academically. I think at one point, and my knowledge is a little bit outdated, so I'd have to go back, but I think it was at one point a whole letter grade on average. A lot of it comes down to maturity, and I think that they're a little bit older on average, and they've developed a lot of these soft skills, like time management, communication skills. And then I think a lot of it is confidence in terms of being willing to sort of communicate with the faculty members and their peers. One of the things that's been really beneficial for faculty is just seeing veterans sort of assimilate. And I think that's one thing that people don't think about is like when we serve in the military, we go to a unit or a training with people from all different backgrounds and all different places across the country, and we have to come together to accomplish a mission. So we're more adjusted to, assimilating and ETSing to a new location and getting comfortable and situated, and then, progressing and also thriving than a lot of other populations. So we actually have a pretty distinct advantage, although it can be a bit of a culture shock to come to a place like Brown. But, we found that the veteran population that, have read really well in the veterans application, and when we really focus on that theme of what is going to be their fit at Brown. And I just want to harp on, like, if your only reason to apply to Brown was because it's an Ivy League school, but a lot of the other things that come with it, they wouldn't be really great fit for you, or you wouldn't really enjoy a lot of it, then Brown's not a great option for you, in my opinion. And that's going to be different for everybody. But the people that really do sort of their research and find a lot of things, are really interested to expand opportunities within the open curriculum, but all the other things that Brown has to offer, then Brown can be a really unique opportunity. So yeah, I would say that there was a lot of discussions about what's going to be the change in terms of the culture and the perception, because, statistically, veterans come from, sort of middle class to lower economic populations. And I think Brown, was just unsure of how that was going to transition into the university at large. And it's been very successful. And, virtually all the veterans have had really positive assimilations into the campus. I would say that there are some veterans that are more traditional, and that they have, a spouse and dependents, and maybe they have a mortgage and they're living 15, 20 minutes. And so they're not as socially active among the traditional population. But then I have the inverse, where very recently, the average age for an undergraduate student veteran was like 27 for years. And I'm seeing at Brown, those numbers actually shift to where maybe it's because Brown's getting a little bit more on the scale of, like, people being really interested in being aware of that as a viable option, to where people have gone right into the military out of high school, were high performers, and then immediately applying to Brown right out of high school. So I think that average age is actually coming down quite a bit. So we're seeing on both sides of the more historically traditional age veterans of like 27, 28, 29, 30. And then we're seeing ones that are like 22-year-old first-year students. And so they've really changed a lot of the perceptions of the traditional populations, because they just become part of the traditional undergraduate population, and they're living on campus, hanging out, joining clubs. So it's been really wonderful to see the success of the initiative to the point where we're at such a high number. And, the university's been very thrilled about the success and the results and what we've been getting out of it. So I don't see that going away anytime soon.
Well, that's great news. As we're, like I said, we're sending more work Bailey's way. But as the excitement continues to grow around Brown, it's nice to hear that, that is something
That's
that'll
certainly a good problem to have, though.
Exactly. Although I'm sure Bailey's inbox is rather full when we we start getting those introduction emails. So one thing else we talk about with students is kind of that return on investment, either GI Bill, financial aid, personal loans, what have you, however they're deciding to pay for their education. Let's talk a little bit about outcomes. So, Mac, your office, assuming, is the career connector, the career preparation. Talk with us a little bit about what that, post graduation community looks like as an alumni, but also for career outcomes.
Sure. I hope this isn't controversial today, but a big reason people go to an Ivy League school is to get access to the network. And, you become forever part of that alumni network where, even if like you do an interview and someone went to another Ivy League school, even if they didn't go to Brown, it's sort of this friendly, oh, you went to an Ivy League, I went to Ivy League, and you have that rapport. But there's also sort of access to sort of the alumni sort of circles and getting some of those communication opportunities. So we have the Office of Career Exploration, we have the alumni networks, we have the Alumni Association, and alumni relations as well. So to where traditional undergraduate students have access sort of immediately to start looking for internship opportunities, summer employment, as well as post-graduation opportunities. But then OMAS itself does additional programmatic initiatives specifically focused on professional development as it relates to veterans. So we've brought in different companies, to talk about different jobs like consulting, which is very popular within veterans. I will say a couple of my veterans got some very interesting, like, wow, that's really interesting. I didn't know that was what consulting was. I don't know if I want to go down that path anymore. It sounds like a big lift. And I was like, yeah, that's, I'm glad you found it now while at Brown, instead of once you graduate and you're doing your interviews, as well as several other different, companies and organizations. And then we've done professional development workshops. One we did that was really successful was we brought in a speaker just to talk about networking. And it was sort of like, networking doesn't have to be awkward, even though it can be a very overwhelming process of going to sort of, a professional development conference, or maybe NatCon, with Student Veterans America. and sort of connecting with different people and trying to put your best foot. How do you do that within the identity of being a veteran? And our goal is to see them land on their feet very quickly. I will say that one of the things is that we do leave them to their own devices, and that they can elect to get really involved, or they can hold off until their senior year, and then come back to us and say, I'm in a little bit of a panic because I'm trying to find gainful employment. We can help them in any capacity, but I would say that obviously they're going to be more successful if they're working with our program the whole time. But that's sort of the reality, is if you let them make their own decisions of that. And most often they've expanded their opportunities and their experience in other ways at the university beyond the professional development.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, as we begin to wrap up the conversation, thank you both for your insight, sharing your experiences, and the great work that you all doing. We just want to give both of you an opportunity to share one last piece of advice, either about Brown, about higher education for student veterans, with listeners. So, Mac, we'll wrap up and get started with you first.
Sure. I would say that, we talk a lot. I was actually listening to some podcasts of services school before. I think that I actually come from an admissions background as well. So that's why Bailey and I have this rapport where we'll both meet with a prospective student if the student wants it. From two sides of you can ask Brown to connect more and learn more about the program. We're going to make ourselves available in as best we can. And so I would just say that don't be afraid to ask. And if you can't get access, then ask to speak to a current student. That would just be one thing. The other piece is, you shouldn't sell yourself short. I think veterans, special populations are going to be given special consideration. And there's a lot of veterans that maybe it's due imposter syndrome, or, just where they came from, feeling like they weren't good enough to be considered, or don't want to put their name in the hat for some of these incredible opportunities. The reason that a lot of these Ivy League institutions and tier one academic institutions are seeing more veterans matriculate is because they're realizing how wonderful they are in coming into the community, and how much they add to any population. And so you are a part of that identity, and you are part of that population, and you should definitely make sure that you explore every single opportunity. So just make sure you don't sell yourself short. And it used to be 5 schools that I would recommend, but I would say now it's 7 schools. So 5 reach schools, 1 safety school, and then I always say a location school. So whether you like snowboarding or skiing or surfing or fishing, or maybe even hunting, you say, if I don't get in all these schools and I get into one of these, at least I can do this and have a great time for the next 2 to 4 years. But that might be a little bit unique of a recommendation. I just find it lands very well with veterans. So that was a couple of pieces of advice, so I apologize.
No, I appreciate it. And Bailey, what about you?
Yeah, I think those are all great pieces of advice. I love that fun last piece about which schools to consider putting on your list. I think that's a fun way to think about it. I think my, kind of best advice with the admission process, and as you're kind of approaching it, is when you think about all of the different pieces of your application, your recommendations are coming from other sources. Your transcripts are, something that's kind of set in stone by the time you're applying. And so the parts of the application that I think each student, each applicant can really have a big impact with is through those written components. So those short answers, those essays, whatever schools you're applying to, they're going to have a written component of their application. And so kind of focusing on what you can control in this process, I think maybe helps make it feel a little less overwhelming, and really thinking about focusing your effort and your time on those short answers and essays. I think along with that comes, doing that research ahead of time about what schools are going to be a good fit for what you're looking for in your college experience, what schools are going to have the different academic programs that you're hoping to pursue, but what schools are also going to have that community that you're looking for outside of that as well. And then being able to sort of articulate in those short answers and those essays what you're looking for and why the school that you're applying to is going to potentially offer those different opportunities that you've expressed interest in. So I think just focusing on the things you can control, which is those written parts, will hopefully make the whole process feel a little bit less overwhelming.
Yeah, I harp on that so much. And I'm sure throughout the seasons I've shared this analogy, but the best way I explain to our students about the college application process is like a cake, right? Everyone has to bake a cake with the same ingredients. So we all have to submit the application. We all have to submit a letter of recommendation. But the cake that Mac decides to make is going to taste and look different than the cake that I decide to bake and to submit, right? And they both could be delicious. We all had to use the same ingredients, but the frosting we chose, the sprinkles, the colors, right? Like that's the personality. And that's really what makes the cake. And that's what, makes an applicant stand out from another because you're all baking, you're all working with the same ingredients. And so much of that goes into fit too, like what frosting is your fit. And once I can kind of paint that picture for the student to think of it as, not just this archaic process that is checking a box, but to put some personality in it, I think that's when one becomes more fun. But then two, takes the stress out of it, because let's talk about the part of this baking process that you can control. So I love that. That's, your lasting advice there too. So, well, thank you both for your time. This has been so wonderful. I know it's going to be an incredible resource for us to share with prospective applicants. But I also think it's going to, put a face to the name, and it's just going to, open up that conversation. So when we do send prospective applicants your way, they've hopefully already listened to the podcast, and you all can have an incredibly fruitful conversation about what Brown could look like for them. So thank you both for your time, and thanks for being on the Service to School Stories podcast.
Thanks so much for having us.
Absolutely. That's all we have for this episode. Join us next week, same time, same place, where we share more Service to School stories. Service to School Stories is hosted by Sydney Mathis, Chief Program Officer, and Alec Emmert, Service to School CEO. Our podcast is produced and edited by our Director of Communication, Amanda Tobias. Service to School is a 501c3 nonprofit providing free college admission support to transitioning service members and veterans. Join us next week and follow us for more on your favorite social media platforms.